Welcome to TAPAS and Stuff Productions podcast number 22. I am Sage Man, here to talk about my Dungeons & Dragons musical, revisit my favorite childhood book series, watch old Disney films, and perchance share some of my team's art. Don't seem to have any this week. As far as I can tell, no one's listened to the podcast for many weeks now. I know what the problem is. It's that circumstances had to write Natty off the show. I know. I miss Natty too. Totally agree that the podcast is no fun when it's just me, but I pledged to do this every week. One of these years, I'm going to have at least one follower who's so devoted to Tapas that they're going to be overjoyed to discover this great big record of every thought I ever had when constructing the channel. That's the dream, at any rate. Still all clogged. Spring allergies, man. They're no fun. At least I don't sneeze every few seconds like I did the first time I came here and started working. Companions of the Dance Hall, Act 2, Scene 8, takes place in the sewers of Calimport. Dritz finds himself alone there after being teleported by Bodhi, but Entreri finds him almost immediately and makes a huge speech, which Dritz calls well-written and well-acted. Dritz is deeply uninterested in continuing with their rivalry, but eventually agrees to fight Entreri just to get the guy to leave him alone. And so they duel, in song of course. The song's called Strike for Strike, and I don't have a tune for it, and I don't feel like sharing any of the lyrics. I'll just say that I think they're some of the best lyrics I've written. Really good representation of Dritz and Entreri. And, I think it'll come across a lot better when there's music set to them, so that's one you're going to have to wait for the real show. There is a verse where Virna feels despair for having lost control of the narrative. Jarlaxle comes in and gives her a spoken word pep talk. The song ends with Dritz about to deal a fatal blow, when he's once again teleported somewhere else by someone. Entreri falls to his knees in despair, and Jarlaxle finds him and gets him to his feet, assuring Entreri that whatever else is going on, they can't possibly miss the final battle. Droon! Today we're reading The Secrets of Droon, Book 20. Published in October 2003, illustrated by David Morrell with the cover by Tim Jessel. The title, In the Ice Caves of Krog. Let's get on with it then, shall we? Chapter 1, The Blizzard Wizard. The book opens in an art class at school. Eric is wearing gloves and reveals to the other two that his powers have been acting up. Everything he touches turns to ice, and his fingers are constantly shooting off silver sparks. He really wishes he could go to Droon right now, but then school gets cancelled due to a freak blizzard. Eric immediately realizing he must somehow be responsible. They go to Droon, and the stairs lead them to Kia's childhood cottage in the Farn Woods. Chapter 2 of Harps and Happenings. Kia and her mother are there, along with Max and the Knights of Silver Snow. Galen and King Zello are searching for Spar, who is questing to unite his three powers. But even as that goes on, another threat has risen. An icy monster called Krog. Several of the Droonians paint a picture of Krog, saying his face is half like a growl, half like a stumble. He has scales like a draknak, quag feet, and the fiery breath of a moonflod. That's silly. Droon is silly sometimes. Kia's harp is singing her songs about Krog and where to find him, and it's said that only a great power can defeat Krog. Eric shows off his silver sparks, and Kia is thrilled. Suddenly, the cottage is attacked by a swarm of the Golden Wasp's victims, a whole army of wraiths. Chapter 3, Whispers Without Words. There's a cramped battle in the cabin. Relna sends the kids, Max and Rolf, out to stop Krog, while the Queen and the other two knights stay behind and fight. They head north for the titular ice caves of Krog. Chapter 4, A Torch at Midnight. As they travel, they come upon the smoking remains of a village attacked by Krog. A young girl named Motley, the lone survivor, appears with a lantern and claims that after Krog destroyed the village, someone called the Prince of Stars chased him away. The harp offers a riddle that leads them to a river, where they take a raft used by the Prince of Stars that will lead them to the ice caves. They find a mountainous island and feel sure that Krog can be found there. Wraiths attack, and Motley falls off the raft and Max goes in to save her. Chapter 5, The Iceman Comes and Goes. Motley and Max disappear into the darkness, leaving the kids and Rolf to search the island for Krog. They climb the snowy mountain and come across a chasm spanned by a tiny bridge of ice. A shaggy white creature who calls himself the Iceman appears and demands that Neil answer his riddles. The riddles are very Droonian, but Kia feeds him the answers telepathically until finally he gets stuck on a division problem. With that over, Rolf fights the Iceman, and the two of them tumble into the chasm, leaving the kids alone. Chapter 6, Palace o' Donuts. They come upon an icy castle where a little man dressed in red welcomes them and invites them to eat before they go off to face Krog. They come to a dining hall where each of them see their favorite food and begin digging in. Neil sees donuts, Julie sees corn chips, Kia sees potato soup, and Eric sees apple pie. Eric is the only one to be suspicious of the fact that they're each seeing and eating something different, and soon the three who are eating fall asleep. Guided by another riddle from the harp, Eric sprinkles snowflakes on the others to wake them. They escape the ice castle as it suddenly begins to melt away. When the castle disappears, it reveals the entrance to the ice caves, and they hear Krog roaring from within. Chapter 7, Lots of Loot. In Krog's cave, they find heaps of treasure, and decide to take up some weapons. Kia finds a rope, Julie a club, Neil a torch. Eric finds a green water skin that reminds him of what both Motley and the Donut Man said about the Prince of Stars, that his eyes were green as emeralds. Krog himself appears, and the kids face him in battle. Chapter 8, I Only Have Ice for You. Krog speaks to Eric in his mind, stating that he only has 2 small weaknesses. As Eric fights Krog, he realizes Krog's eyes are green, and states that Krog and the Prince of Stars are one and the same. With these words, Krog transforms back into the prince, a tall and handsome man in a cloak and boots. The prince explains that long ago he awakened in Droon with no memory and has been wandering the world looking for answers. When he defeated Krog, he became Krog. The prince reunites Eric with his friends, as well as Rolf and Max, who were safely brought to the ice caves by Motley and the Iceman. The prince explains that Motley, the Iceman, and the Donut Man were his 3 shape-shifting pet ravens, Motley, Otley, and Jotley, who hoped to give the kids enough clues to figure out that Krog was the prince. The Wraiths return and steal Kia's harp from her. The Prince of Stars leads the charge to get it back from them. Chapter 9, Racing the Wraiths. The prince explains that yesterday in Krog's lair he came upon the golden wasp, now large enough for a man to ride. Krog must have stolen the wasp long ago, and the Wraiths have taken the harp because it can control the wasp. The heroes pile onto a magic sled that will take them to the Wraiths' destination, Jaffa City. There, they battle Wraiths with the help of Relna, the other 2 knights, and Galen and Zello. Spar arrives, riding the giant wasp and using Kia's harp. The Prince of Stars transforms back into Krog, and he and Eric fly up to battle Spar. Chapter 10, Star Sparkle. Sparkle, sparkle. Eric and Spar get in an aerial magical duel. Awesome. Spar blasts Eric off of Krog's back, but loses the harp in the process. Neil plays the harp erratically, making the wasp go nuts. Spar rides the bucking wasp back to the Darklands, and the Wraiths follow. The Prince of Stars pledges his service to Zello and Relna, but admits he must go on his own quest. Along with his ravens, he departs, and Eric and Galen discuss the strange sense they have that they've known the prince all their lives. The Knights of Silversnow return to the ice caves to return the treasure to everyone Krog stole from. The kids return to the upper world and wonder if the snow day is just a plain old snow day. To find out, they go play in the snow. So, I can't quite put my finger on why, but I kind of feel like the series hit a slump at this point. This book and several that come after it just didn't impress me. Not as a kid, nor when I rediscovered the series just a couple years ago. So yeah, my enthusiasm kind of dwindles from here, and not a big deal. A lot of stories hit a slump around the middle, and Droon definitely climbs back up at some point later. It's not all bad, it just didn't impress me as much as the series had been doing up to this point. I like Otley, Jotley, and Motley and their tests. They're definitely the best thing about the Prince of Stars, who's a character I'm just not fond of. He's not very interesting to me, and the future revelations about him were exactly what I was hoping wouldn't be revealed about him, so pretty much my least favorite character in the series, and this being his debut, you can understand why this is among my least favorite books in the series. Anyway, 5 new guest characters to fantasy cast in this book, 4 of whom take 2 different forms. The first is Kia's harp. This, I believe, is the only book where the harp actually has a voice for singing. I would cast Sheena Easton, best known as an 80s pop star. She did some voice acting and some very nerdy stuff in the 90s, so I'm a fan. I've also been pondering, if this was a Rooster Teeth production, I'd be replacing some of my more famous casting choices with Rooster Teeth employees and members of Team Starkid. In this case, Casey Lee Williams, who sings all the songs for Ruby, would be my choice for the harp, but I'm not going to tell you any of my other change plans. I'll stick to my first one. But after I'm done, maybe I'll put a meme up on my DeviantArt for, my current plan. So for the role of Motley, both as a girl and the Black Raven, my first thought was young Isabella Akers type, until I found out that Isabella Akers was in fact only 13 years old, so I could in fact go with the actual Isabella Akers. Of course, now she's 18, but it's also now a cartoon, so could still go with Isabella Akers. For Otley, both as the Iceman and the White Raven, he would be voiced by voice actor Phil Lamar. I originally envisioned the Iceman as a guy in a Yeti suit, forced perspectived to be the same height as Rolf. The Ravens would of course be puppets. And then Jotley, both as the Donut Man and the Red Raven, would be portrayed by comedian Emo Phillips. And finally, the voice of both Krog and the Prince of Stars shall be voice actor Jason Marsden. Yeah, he's got a very youthful, soothing voice that I think would fit very, very well. And finally, today in Keys and Kingdoms, we're watching The Jungle Book. 19th film in the Disney animated canon, number 28 on my list as a whole, the final film of Walt Disney's lifetime. He didn't live to see it finished, but he worked on it. Arguably the last film of the Silver Age, certainly the last truly great movie the Disney studio would make for quite some time. I'm honestly kind of dreading dipping into the Bronze Age. The DVD I got of The Jungle Book on Amazon turned out to be a Region 2 DVD, meaning it's built for Europe, Japan, and South Africa instead of Region 1, the United States and Canada. So I couldn't play it on my TV, had to play it on my computer, which I could only do after switching my computer's disk drive from Region 1 to Region 2, a switch I'm apparently only allowed to perform 3 more times, so this DVD mix-up had better not happen again. Oi, Disney Plus can't get here soon enough. If you're listening to this from the future and wondering what we ever did before Disney Plus, well, there's an answer for you. What we did before Amazon, I couldn't tell you. Anyway, The Jungle Book, based on a book by Rudyard Kipling, though based incredibly loosely, borrowing only the names and species of the characters and the basic premise, the script being instead based more on the personalities of the voice actors than on anything resembling Kipling's story. Incidentally, The Jungle Book, we're used to it because it's a Disney classic, but The Jungle Book is a really stupid title for a book, isn't it? Granted, it's an even worse title for any form of media adaptation that's not a book. If the story were about a book, I'd understand the title, but it's not. It's just called The Jungle Book because it's a book set in the jungle. That's ridiculous. Well, like most Disney films of the man himself's lifetime, possibly the last one to do so, maybe, I don't know, this movie opens with a book, which does help justify the title somewhat. Unusually, we get a glimpse of the book's table of contents. The list of chapters seems to describe the events of the movie, so I wonder if maybe the movie is closer to the book than I thought. I'm gonna guess that no, the list of chapters was made up for the movie. We open on a village in an Indian jungle, and the credits roll. The voice cast gives us the names of the characters the voice actors play, which is nice of them, although it's not a complete list. Some voice actors go uncredited. Ooh, the Sherman Brothers did the songs for this one too, though evidently someone else wrote The Bare Necessities. The film opens on Bagheera the Panther. Side note, a panther is not a real thing. It's a leopard or jaguar with melanism. The word panther is more accurately applied to the American mountain lion, though that thing's got enough names already. Anyway, Bagheera the, I guess, leopard, played by Sebastian Cabot, discovering a wrecked river-going vessel, the lone survivor being a baby. A man-cub, as the characters refer to it in one of the few genuine nods to the use of language in the book. Compassion stirs in Bagheera's heart, and he brings the baby to the local wolf pack, who have recently had a litter of pups, and the mother wolf takes him in. 10 years later, the man-cub has grown into Mowgli. Actually, Rudyard Kipling intended the name to be pronounced Mowgli, but thanks to this film, I don't think even Andy Serkis's more faithful adaptation from last year could be bothered pronouncing it Mowgli. Mowgli is depicted largely through reused animation of Arthur from The Sword and the Stone, and once again, director Wolfgang Reitherman uses his own flesh and blood as the voice actor for the lead child character, in this case his third son, Bruce Reitherman. Mowgli being 10 years of age, Bagheera and the wolves are beginning to think about returning Mowgli to his own kind, which has increased urgency now that Shere Khan the tiger, who has a noted grudge against all humankind, has returned to the jungle. Bagheera brings Mowgli out into the jungle late at night. With Mowgli getting his first dialogue scene, I again return to a thought I had long ago about keys and kingdoms, that humans can speak with animals if they were raised without any human contact. I do intend to invoke this somewhere. As I've said before, I'm having trouble fitting the Disney-esque stuff into a world based on a core 5th edition setting, but it can work. It can work. Besides, speak with animals is a first-level spell already, so there you go. They settle in a tree to sleep through the night, and are set upon by Kaa the Python, played by Sterling Holloway. Holloway's cutesy voice is surprisingly effective for this spooky role. Kaa hypnotizes Mowgli to sleep and attempts to eat him, but Bagheera fights him off. Kaa is an impossibly long snake, almost comically so. Kaa's intrusion interrupts the non-hostile argument Bagheera and Mowgli were having. Mowgli does not want to go to the village. He wants to stay in the jungle. The next morning, the duo are awakened by a marching herd of elephants led by Colonel Hathi. The elephants are treated with a great deal more reverence in this film's remake, in a manner I assume to be more book-faithful. I don't rightly know. But in this movie, they're a military band. Hathi is played by J. Pat O'Malley, his wife Winifred, who, given the name I'm guessing wasn't in the book, by Verna Felton in her final Disney role, and their son Hathi Jr. by a very, very young Clint Howard. Yes, the Clint Howard. I wonder if he was a cute kid. Probably not. So, from dialogue here, Hathi apparently treats his herd like a military unit because he used to be a war elephant used by some Maharaja or something. Never noticed that bit of dialogue before. That's a depressing note. As I mentioned back when I was reviewing Dumbo, you don't tame or train elephants, you break them. Well, Hathi seems to be fine, sane, and thriving in the wild, his military obsession notwithstanding. The elephant scene ultimately adds nothing to the film. I'm guessing it's just an exhibition of whatever O'Malley was known for. Bagheera and Mowgli's argument comes to a head and they separate. There's a nice moment of silence being golden as Mowgli just wanders around and we enjoy the lovely scenery. And here we finally meet our main man, Baloo the Bear, played by Phil Harris. Mowgli is initially hostile to Baloo, and his pitiful attempts at fighting the bear makes Baloo take pity on him and decide to teach him jungle survival, singing him the Bear Necessities. Not entirely sure what the message of that song is. Keep it simple, I guess? Bagheera observes this and wonders if maybe Mowgli is better off in the jungle. But soon a clan of monkeys kidnap Mowgli and beat the stuffing out of Baloo. They take him to an ancient temple where resides their king, Louie the Orangutan, played by Louis Prima. Fun fact, Louie is that rare character that Disney can't just up and use whenever they want. When he was used in the show Tailspin, Prima's estate sued because Jim Cummings did such a good impression of Prima, and now the character is the intellectual property of Prima's estate. They've gotten around that by using King Louie's twin brother Larry, but I don't think that worked out in the long run because a lot of other Jungle Book material just writes Louie out. Louie is the only major character not from the book, and his deal, as detailed in his song I Want to Be Like You, is to be more like a human. He wants that classic human invention, fire. In another nod to the book, one lyric refers to fire as the red flower, which is used more extensively in the film's remake. Bagheera and Baloo come to rescue Mowgli from Louie, though what kind of danger Louie poses isn't really made clear. Later that night, as Mowgli sleeps, Bagheera and Baloo discuss Mowgli's ultimate fate, Bagheera being of the opinion that he'd be better off in the company of other humans, while Baloo wants to adopt Mowgli as his own. Bagheera eventually gets Baloo to see that a human can't afford to make mistakes in the jungle, and once he name-drops Shere Khan, Baloo submits that Mowgli will be safer in the village. The next morning, Baloo takes his sweet time breaking the news to the man-cub, and once he does, Mowgli feels betrayed and runs off. And here we finally meet our villain, Shere Khan, played by George Sanders. Like Sir Kay before him, he's introduced hunting recycled animation from Bambi. Oh, and the elephants make another appearance. I always thought they were only in the one scene. Okay. Bagheera tries to get Hathi to help him locate Mowgli. Shere Khan overhears the conversation and discovers that the man-cub is on his own. There's another of those nice silent scenes of Mowgli just enjoying the scenery when Kaa comes upon him again. Mowgli fails to resist Kaa's hypnosis, and the snake sings his song, Trust in Me. Brilliantly creepy. Shere Khan interrupts Kaa's attempt to eat the boy, but Kaa denies that he has Mowgli until Shere Khan leaves. But Khan stalls long enough to break Mowgli free of Kaa's hypnosis, and the boy escapes the snake. Then we meet the Vultures, who are caricatures of a then popular British musical group I'm sure no one in this decade has ever heard of. No. So yeah, the Vultures are voiced in the style of the Beatles. Apparently they were originally to be voiced by the Beatles, but there were scheduling conflicts, or perhaps John was morally opposed to working for Disney. Who really knows? But anyway, they're not voiced by the Beatles, just a caricature of them. Though I don't know why 3 of them have Beatles hair, but 1 is bald. None of the Beatles were bald. And when the Vultures sing, they don't sing like the Beatles, they sing in a barbershop style. Apparently Walt Disney felt that a number in the style of the Beatles would date the film, and that barbershop would age better. Poor fool. Though, listening to it, I can tell that the melody was written with the Beatles' style in mind. I'd love to hear it with that kind of arrangement. Yeah, someone do a cover of That's What Friends Are For, in the style of the Beatles. Yeah. And this is when Shere Khan finds Mowgli. Despite making his intentions clear that he wants to kill Mowgli, Mowgli isn't afraid of him until the moment the battle begins. But Baloo shows up to help, and we have our final showdown with some pretty good choreography as Baloo and Shere Khan fight each other. A freak lightning strike, and I do mean freak, it's not raining or anything, hits a tree and sets it on fire, and Mowgli uses the fire to scare Shere Khan away, in a manner, I may add, that would only work in a cartoon, tying his tail around a flaming limb. Baloo seems to have died in the fight, but he wakes up while Bagheera is eulogizing him. Classic Disney fake-out death. Nice. As Mowgli, Baloo, and Bagheera regroup, they hear singing. A human girl leaving the man village to fetch water for her home. The credits identify her only as the girl, while the sequel calls her Shanti. Mowgli is so intrigued by the sight of a fellow human, particularly one of his age and the opposite sex, that he follows her back to the village. Of course, it helps that she flirts with them like they're the last 2 humans on Earth. Sultry temptress. Who is 10? Blech. Bagheera is glad that Mowgli found his way to the village, and Baloo comes to terms with it as well. So the duo walk off into the sunset, singing. So ultimately, not much of a Keys and Kingdoms inspiration due to a lack of supernatural and fantasy elements, but it's a very witty film with very clever dialogue and music and beautiful scenery. Definitely worth checking out. Now, I'm thinking I could make the entire cast of this film with beasts from the 5th edition Monster Manual, so let's see. Baloo is substantially larger than Bagheera, so I think he'd have the stats of a brown bear, challenge rating 1. Panthers have a 1/4 challenge rating. Tigers also have a rating of 1. Let's see. Kaa is pretty darn big, so I think he'd be a giant constrictor snake with a challenge rating of 2. Louie would be an ape with a 1/2 rating, while his people would have baboon stats, challenge rating 0. Elephants have a challenge rating of 4, vultures 0, and wolves 1/4. So, yeah, you know, that 5th edition Monster Manual is very versatile. You know, you hardly need any other rule books to make creatures. And, I forgot to write a conclusion into my script, so I'm ad-libbing now. Good night, everybody. Love you. Bye. Yeah.